Hello friends. So in today's video, I'm going to discuss few advanced techniques for structuring your presentation. Now I have created another video earlier which was about basic structuring skills, mainly for making simple presentations for your school, college projects, internship reports, etc. Our techniques today are of slightly higher complexity level, mainly for making reports and PPTs for business presentations to your clients, partners, stakeholders, etc. Even if you are able to absorb 50 to 60% of today's technique, you will be in a very good position to create PPTs like a pro. So let's see what are the topics that we are going to cover today. Step 1. So we will see here how to build a logical storyline, also known as storyboarding. Step 2. To select an appropriate microstructuring. Step 3. Carefully designing individual slide layout. Step 4. Selecting impactful use of language. And finally step 5, which is to take care of the finer nuances to make your slide really stand out. Now in today's session, I will mainly get into the detail of step 1, 2 and 3, whereas step 4 and 5, which needs more dedicated discussion, I will create a part 2 of today's video for that. So without further ado, let's get started. Step 1. Step 1 is mainly to build a logical storyline. Now, what does it comprise of? So, this logical storylining, also known as macrostructuring, is all about storyboarding, which is a very critical activity that you need to decide upfront, right when you think about making your presentation. You can follow a top-down pyramid approach, which you can see in this slide to build the outline of the presentation. Now, the same topic has been discussed in my first video, where we talked about like how to think about the overarching structure of your PPT. So if you really want to understand that in detail, you can look into my first video, and the link to the first video is given in this slide on the top right corner. Let's do a quick recap nevertheless. So at the very first step within this step, you have to understand what's the main message that you are gonna convey. So that forms the topic of your presentation. As next step, you try to understand like what are the components which you are going to use to convey the messages across your PPT. So the tangible version of that is nothing but the agenda or the table of content. And finally, you detail out the individual section which you have identified. I'll take a simple example to explain. Again, referring back to the example which I have used in my first video, which talks about a presentation regarding how to increase the revenue from ecotourism. So very first of all, as you can see here, topic of the presentation is pretty straightforward, and that conveys the message in a clear, crisp way. That's a step 1. Step 2 is to decide the structure of the presentation. So that forms the agenda. Clearly, as you can see, it has got a context, it has got the opportunity identification and analysis, recommendation, Q&A, and then the appendix section. And finally, you detail out each of the sections. So that forms your overarching storyline of your entire PPT. Now, let's get to the more difficult and slightly interesting aspect, which is about selecting an appropriate microstructuring. Now, what exactly is this microstructuring? Now, within the PPT, this microstructuring, also known as effective framework selection, is the most important part, whereby you put your thoughts in a logical framework or a structure. Now, there are n number of frameworks which are available out there, and we didn't want to cover all of them in today's presentation. The objective is only to cover some of them which might come very handy to you. And trust me, if you know at least 3 to 4 of whatever I am showing here, your 80% of the requirement will be met. Now, as you can see in this slide, there are 6 different frameworks which I wanted to depict, and you can select any one of them depending on the context of your entire PPT. So the different frameworks are like Nisi-Shu tree, So MISI issue tree is nothing. It's mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive issue tree. It is used to break down a problem into smaller elemental components, mainly used for root cause analysis. I'm going to discuss this in detail in the next slide. Next is list representation. So this is mainly used to describe any set of or sequence of activities which is linear in nature. Next, org chart view, mainly used to represent any hierarchical structure. And finally, power of 3 and 5, which is mainly to represent maybe a trend or some kind of cyclic process or steps. Usually we select some odd numbers like 3, 5 or maybe 7. Next, 2 by 2. So this is mainly a benchmarking exercise which we use as an anchor of the framework when, let's say, we do some kind of assessment of a particular company against its peer. We usually select 2 dimensions across the 2 axes and try to make a scatter plot out of their positioning. Now, and the last one is timeline view, which usually depicts the evolution of or the journey of any particular company or maybe anything else as well over a decade or so. So for example, let's say I want to study the product innovation journey of any company, let's say Apple. In today's session, I am mainly going to cover in detail the first 3 framework, I mean the one which are present in the first row. And if you want more detailed video on all these 6 framework or maybe something else as well, you can leave your comments and I will cater to your request. Okay, then let's get into it. The first one is a MISI issue tree. So this is the best way of representing some mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive elemental components which are the root cause, let's say, of any particular major issue. That's why it's called as issue tree. And as you know, the mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive word is pretty much intuitive. It explains that the different components which you have identified, there is no overlap and they are very exhaustive in nature. Now, an example here, for example, the key question is like, what are the ways of increasing revenue from ecotourism? I start by breaking it down into major questions which contributes towards the impact in the revenue from ecotourism. First question, how can we increase the number of visitors? Then the other 2 contributors are like how to increase the length of the stay per visitor, and finally how to increase the spend per visitor per day. Now in order to get there are a few more questions which I would be interested to ask, which you can see in the third column. In the interest of time, I am not getting into the content of this slide. Just I'll help you to understand that how this structuring has been done with an example. For example, if I pick up the lever that is increasing the revenue through increasing the length of the stay per visitor. Now what are the further subcomponents to that which will help me to increase the revenue and hence which will help me to increase the length of the stay per visitor and hence help me to increase the overarching revenue for ecotourism. So these elemental components are like, let's say we increase the number of tourist attractions or biodiversity attractions because we are talking about ecotourism. So more the number of places, definitely people will stay longer to cover all of them. And second is, how can we make people to visit multiple times in a year or maybe keep it open throughout the year? So that means how can we promote some off-seasonal travel kind of campaign? So I hope you got an idea about how the issue tree breaks down a major problem into elemental components. Now, next one. Next one is list representation. It is usually used to depict a set of sequential activities represented in the form of phases. For example, here the topic at hand is product development life cycle. What are the phases? Now, there are 4 different phases which you can see. One is conceptualization, then second is designing, development, and finally testing. And again, I'm not getting into the detail of what is covered in each of these phases, but I hope you got the idea, like it is mainly used to represent a set of series of activities or steps. And usually the blue box, as you can see here, or the structure to be more precise that you can see here, are called as chevron, and that's the best way of representing set of phases and then detailing out at the bottom of it like what does each phase entail. Next, org chart view. It is mainly used to represent any hierarchical structure. Now, for example, I wanted to represent what are the different departments and what is their hierarchy in a particular company. The company here is a hypothetical one, let's say business co. And at the very top, I have the CEO office. Quite understandable. They do all the strategy. Then we have the different departments which rolls up to the CEO office. Sales and retail, manufacturing and operations, corporate functions, partnership management. And each of them has got a set of function, as you can see. For example, corporate functions have, it has HR, finance, all the back office job basically, infra and IT analytics. Now, one feature I would like to mention here is that you need not be always exhaustive. You cannot be always exhaustive in your representation. So better to put a disclaimer like non-exhaustive, as you can see in this red box beside your framework, whatever you choose. Well, with that, we go to the step 3, which is about carefully designing the individual slide layout. Now, we have decided the storyline of the entire PPT. We have decided what framework we are going to use to anchor our entire content. And then we get to the individual slide making. And there are some best practices which you can follow while deciding the layout of a slide. So try to treat every slide like a painting canvas so that you are able to convey your message in an impactful way. It is good to have the representational flow in a particular manner, like either top down or left to right. And then you can think of these 6 elements to help you guide that how will you make the layout of this slide. So at the very beginning, you have to think about impactful title or heading, which should be direct and to the point. It can be a sentence in itself as well. Next is a subtitle. Sometimes the title might not be sufficient. Then you have to add a subtitle which kind of describes the objective of, also called as subheading by the way, which kind of describes the objective of the slide. Then don't make it too text heavy. Also try to embed some icons, visuals, images, graphics. Try to leave some white space because too much of text or too much of visuals, if there is no white space, is not quite appealing to the eyes. But again, don't make it a lot of white space thing as well. Then try to ensure that there's a uniformity in the template as you go from one slide to another slide. For example, the slide master view, the page number, the heading, the font, etc. Anyways, I'll make a separate video about these finer nuances. And finally, the real estate. So real estate is all about how you divide the section of your PPT visually so that you can present the different messages in a compartmentalized manner, and at the same time make sure that the space is very efficiently used in the entire slide. Let's try to understand this in detail with an example. For example, I have been asked by my senior to depict the overview of a particular company, which is a business co. It's a hypothetical company, as I have mentioned. So as you can see here, it's a representation of the company overview in a slide. I have divided it into 4 sections. I first thought of mentioning some company information like when it was established, what kind of business it does, how many employees it has, what kind of strategy it has. Then I wanted to present some financial information. I also wanted to showcase its share of the revenue by its different products and also by the region. Pretty much tells about the company strength, financial strength, its business in this one slide. Now, if I compare this with the 6 levered approach in the previous slide that I have seen, then this is how it flows. At the very beginning, the title. So as you can see, I have selected a crisp, simple title, company overview. Nothing more to say. Also, I've added a subtitle, which is about what's the objective. Objective is to understand the business co in detail. Next, now as you see that it's not only text, but I have also left enough space, given enough space to the visuals, charts, etc. There are enough white space as well. It's not too busy or cluttered. Then the layout. The layout always, as you can see, is uniform across my entire deck. As you can see, the background has got a watermark, a grayish watermark, and also I have added page number, my fonts of my heading, and their coordinates are pretty much uniform as you go from one slide to another. And finally, the real estate. I have divided it into 4 sections. Each of them conveys a unique aspect. So I think net this layout is very decent, and just by following these 6 rules, I have been able to create this slide with a nice layout. Well, with that, I think we covered all the 3 steps that I wanted to present today. And step 4 and 5, which is about finer nuances like selection of the right impactful language and other cosmetics of the slides, is something that I'm going to cover with more detail in my next video. So if you found it useful, then please let me know. Please at the same time like, share and subscribe to my channel Zosiverse. And if there is any particular requirement or any particular topic on which you would want me to create a video, please leave your comments and definitely I'll cater to your ask. And thank you everyone. Have a great day. Bye.